So, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are on their way, or they're already out given that I make videos once every 6 years apparently, and I gotta say, I haven't been this hyped for a Pokemon game since Black and White. Being the first games after Legend Arceus set the foundation for open worlds, the prospect for an open world Pokemon game where you can do whatever you want whenever has been a fantastic idea that I'm surprised it took them this long to do it. My only request to Game Freak is please, for the love of God, don't carry that research level bullshit over. That shit needs to go ASAP. But that's not why I'm talking about Pokemon again. If you know, or don't somehow, years ago I made a countdown talking about my 15 favorite Pokemon of all time, which was a decent video where some of my opinions have held up even though the mic quality was terrible. And while some time has passed, we got sequels to Sun and Moon, and an entire generation has passed since then. So I figured I'd go ahead and do it again with a more modern mindset to welcome this new generation with open arms. Some of y'all may know about this little thing people have done on Twitter where they pick a Pokemon of each type from this image on screen and display their personal favorites. And it's always fun to scroll through and see other people's takes, or just getting your friends in and on the action to see what their lists have to say about their tastes. Now I figured I'd do my sequel video in a similar fashion, but with this twist to not only build my hype for Scarlet and Violet, but to give some love to other Pokemon I haven't talked about before. Though, unfortunately, I gotta talk about those damn dirty rules first before we start. I know, I hate this part too, but trust me, it's important. I'll be starting from the top left corner, grass in this case, going right, talking about that type, and then making my way down as we go. The only major criteria are first, I will not be putting the same Pokemon in two different types if they happen to be dual types, because that's just redundant. So don't expect to see Bulbasaur, for example, on the grass section, then see him again in the poison section. Silly little attention whore, you only get one slot on this grid, you Cabbage Patch baby. Second, I'll be adding some honorable mentions after each explanation, so the same rules apply to the honorable mentions as well. And thirdly, no alternate forms if they happen to have different types from the original designs, though regional forms with different types are fair game. And lastly, I won't be including anything from Gen 9, mainly because I'm gonna need time for them to fully grow on me. Though, if any of them have a solid chance of making it right now, it's Cyril Edge. What can I say? That design is sick. Anyways, you confused yet? Good, let's begin the damn video already. Grass types are typically your specialized type that you'll most likely see on a lot of people's teams. It's one of the three main starter types after all. And although grass is one of the most weakness-ridden types in the game, they're always helpful for type coverages against a lot of common types, so you're never not happy to have one on your team. And as for the starters, I'm usually a grass type loyalist for 5 out of the 8 generations. 6's Sprigatito lives up to the potential and doesn't have a shit final evolution. But my favorite grass starter and second favorite Pokemon of all time is Decidueye. First of all, I love birds. I'm an animal lover of all kinds, unless it's possums, hero mains, or people who find Among Us memes unironically funny. But the top 3 in no particular order for me would be lizards, fish, and of course, birds. Birds are just adorable, beautiful, fun, and sometimes they leave little surprises on your favorite shirt after they sit on your shoulder for more than 10 minutes. Thanks a lot for that, Ibuki. Some of my favorite types of birds, however, are owls. So of course I grew attached to Rowlet the second I saw him. Oh my god, he's so precious. I just want to hug you and never let you go. Rowlet goes from the cutest Pokemon of all time, I still stand by that, fight me bitch, to some sort of weird butler, which is, interesting, I guess, but I still kind of like it, to this Robin Hood-esque assassin owl badass. The design is just so sleek and edgy, and I love it, because of course I would. His hood literally functions like an actual hoodie, and he pulls on the vines around his neck when he's flustered or when he's about to go to sleep. I mentioned that he's sort of a Robin Hood-esque owl for a reason, as he uses his wings and hoodie vines as a makeshift bow, and he uses his feathers as arrows. That's pretty dope. What's even more weird but still badass is that he can prevent foes from escaping by shooting arrows at their shadows. I guess that explains the ghost typing somewhat, but that's literally the coolest thing ever. I swear to god, they haven't made a Pokemon this cool since Generation 4, but that's neither here nor there. He's pretty solid overall in stats, with a solid mixed attack, special attack, and a decent special defense, making him very good for PvE with his solid move pool to boot. And at one point, I became obsessed with shiny hunting in Sun and Moon, and when I was doing the SOS method, because I guess I didn't hate myself enough, Decidueye was there every step of the way as my shiny hunter of choice. Seriously, what's not to love? Well, I guess his slow-ass speed of 70, which is literally the only thing keeping him from being my favorite Pokemon of all time. I originally thought that a lot of people were going to say I only put him at number 2 because of the new toy syndrome, and while that actually ended up happening for the other Gen 7 Pokemon on that list, I'm happy to say that Decidueye has still held up for me, and I couldn't be happier. And I know that some of you are going to ask for my opinion on the Hisuian form, given that he's themed after a samurai. I think it's fine. Honestly, I hated it when I first saw it, and I thought about picking Oshawott instead, but I decided to stick with Rowlet in hopes that it would grow on me, and it did, but not enough to like it or prefer it over the original. I don't vibe with the theming as well as the original, which makes me sound like a hypocrite to some of you. It's even slower than the original. The shiny color palette is super disappointing compared to the original's amazing shiny, and the typing is one that I'm honestly starting to get sick of. He's one of 2 Pokemon introduced in Legends to be grass fighting, and he's the worst one between the 2. So overall, it's not bad, but I'll gladly take the original as my partner any day of the week. Honorable mentions include Sceptile, my second favorite grass starter with that sleek design in Pokken Tournament, Cacturn for the creepy concept and unique battle properties, even if he's complete dog shit, and Flapple, because his name is Flapple, and that's honestly hilarious. Plus, he was one of the MVPs of my Let's Play in Pokemon Sword. Fire types are another common and very popular type for most teams, as you may have already guessed by me saying that last time. And of the 3 types, the fire starters are probably the most common amongst the 3. I mean, can you really blame people? Charizard is one of the GOATs, at least that's what Game Freak seems to think anyway. Blaziken and Infernape are really cool and fun to use. Emboar is lame, but at least he's got a sick shiny. Incineroar is pretty dope. However, my favorite fire type isn't even a starter, though it's been one of the coolest Pokemon to ever exist since 2011. It's your boy Wombu, Chandelure. So most people really seem to hate Gen 5 for introducing too many object-based Pokemon, when they literally worship Gen 1 even though it introduced just as many object-based Pokemon, so what the hell? But how can you say you hate Chandelure? Look at this design! I love ghost types, as will be made very clear as we go along the list, but this was the first fire ghost type, and I don't think they could have picked anything more perfect than a haunted Chandelure. Its lore is also hella creepy, as it sucks at people's souls, and those souls are burnt to the crisp. Like, what the hell, Game Freak? First, a hellhound that causes 4th degree burns, now lamps and furniture that will send my soul to hell? E for everyone, kids! And his stats will make sure that stays the case. Mid stats all around, but a special attack of 145 on a non-legendary? Alakazam be looking with jealousy. Plus, I know I'll mention shinies a lot on this list, but Chandelure has probably my favorite shiny in the series. It's at least top 3. Plus, there's also Pokken Tournament where Chandelure has probably the best personality in the game. It's just so cute. Though you can't fool me with that silly demeanor, motherfucker. I know exactly what you're plotting. I originally ranked him as my 11th favorite Pokemon of all time if I remember correctly, but nowadays he'd be a top 5 easy. And one reason I failed to mention until now is because of a YouTuber named Wombu. I started this channel after being exposed to the early countdown artists like Josh Scorcher, Alex Rokon, aka the Autarch of Flame, Rabbit Luigi, Fawful's Minion, and several others like that. I was inspired to follow in their footsteps and try this YouTube thing out, with mixed results and a very inconsistent upload schedule. I'm so sorry about that. But I discovered Wombu during a collab he did with Josh on Phoenix Wright Spirit of Justice, and his sense of humor and interesting editing style inspired me to try even harder, and I eventually want to incorporate something like that into my videos someday. Whenever I see a Chandelure, I always crack a smile, probably because I can't take it seriously anymore after watching this goofball and his own content forever breaking the illusion, I guess. But it always reminds me to keep trying harder with my videos, and I always thank Wombu for that. If you're watching this, Wombu, well, you're probably not, but if you are, thank you for inspiring me to keep going. I went way off track with this one. Anyways, Wombu is the best fire type ever.
Bam.
Honorable mentions include Blaziken, my favorite fire starter, Houndoom for its mix of having a badass design, typing, and scary mythos, and Arcanine for being my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon of choice. And yes, that includes the Hisuian form, which I also like a lot. Water, the third and final starter type, and also the most common type in the game. I mean, it covers most of the planet, and IGN spawned the second most annoying meme of all time because of it. From small reptiles to all walks of sea life, and whatever the hell Ludicolo is supposed to be, water is one type that will never disappoint you, and you'd be doing yourself just as much a disservice for not having one on your team as much as if you didn't have a fire type. Though, because there's so many of them, I don't really find myself wanting to expand my taste and trying any new ones outside of a starter or my favorites. Though, speaking of starters, I find myself picking grass over water or fire simply because I prefer grass types and because there's already a ton of other Pokemon of the fire and water types that I just don't even bother. Out of the 8 generations so far, I only picked a water starter a grand total of 3 times. Totodile and Crystal, but I only played that for the shiny Celebi, Sobble and Shield because it seemed like the least bad option to me, and in Pokemon Y, I picked Froakie, and oh boy was I glad that I did. Admittedly, I didn't always feel this way about him upon first viewing. I remember when X and Y came out and I saw the final forms of the starters. Chespin turned into Bluto with a spike fetish, Delphox is an abomination, and Greninja was honestly, I didn't know what to think at the time. I didn't like any of them, and I simply picked Froakie because I disliked his final form the least out of all of them. But thankfully, he grew on me after he reached his final form, and you finally see what he's all about. He's a frog ninja. I like frogs, I like ninjas. What's not to love? Even better when you find out the starters of Gen 6 are based off of RPG classes. Chestnut is a knight, Delphox is based off of an abomination, and Greninja is the thief class. Again, the design took a bit of time, but it really works and is instantly iconic. His tongue is wrapped around his neck like a scarf, he shoots sharp shurikens made out of water from his hands, he acts like a stereotypical ninja, and does typical ninja poses. His stats are also pretty good. Lackluster bulk for a water type, but he makes up for it with really good speed and mixed attacking capabilities. Add on to his hidden ability, Protean, which gives him guaranteed stab on any move he uses. Good support moves too, so go nuts. And then there's Ash Greninja. I mean, I'm low-key not a fan of the fact that they made Ash canon in the games with this form, but Ash Greninja is hands down the strongest starter they've created yet. Kill one Pokemon and Ash Greninja instantly becomes as strong as Mewtwo. I mean, sure, why the fuck not? Plus, I already talked about it before, but Greninja is one of my favorite characters in Smash Ultimate for casual play. He's a super fast Whiff Punish character with an insane combo game and damage output in exchange for not being able to deal with shields in order to save his life. Overall, not much to say about him that I dislike. The design is good, he's fun to use, fun to play as in Smash, he's the whole package. Oh, and 6 shiny by the way. Honorable mentions go to Milotic for its grace and beautiful design along with its versatility in battle, Lapras because it's just adorable, and Starmie, my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon for the design, lore, and usefulness in battle. Probably the closest honorable mention I've shared so far. Normal types are the second most common type in the game behind water types. You'll mostly find them at the beginning, and it's not uncommon for people to use them until the late game where most of them fall off, you know, unless your name is Staraptor. They're super versatile, with most of them having the ability to use multiple different types of moves, and immunity to ghost types, and gaining stabbed on normal moves, which are usually quite strong. Though, honestly, normal is probably my least favorite type in the game. I could tell you easily what my favorite Pokemon of each type is without much of a second thought, but normal was one of 2 types where I legit struggled to pick a favorite one for this video. I had a 3-way tie for the longest time, but that time is over thanks to Legends Arceus and its introduction of Hisuian, Zorua, and Zoroark. So, is counting these 2 kind of a cop-out? Yes, it is, but I don't care. Now I gotta say, the way they introduced these 2 is quite ingenious, even for the Pokemon Company. The first hints were in the form of a found footage type of video, and it genuinely gets really creepy at the end, akin to something like Blair Witch Project. It keeps you guessing what the guy in the video is talking about. Red fur and yellow eyes, but then they release a clean version and reveals, oh wow, that's straight up adorable, I can't wait to see more of them. First of all, normal ghost type, a top 3 most desired type combination for me. Now we just gotta have poison ice and bug dragon type soon. Please, Game Freak, it's been so long. Second, I was already a big fan of Zoroark, so seeing it get some regional love was pretty exciting. Normally, Zorua and Zoroark are fox Pokemon that had the power to create illusions and occasionally play tricks, but people got so sick of them that they banished some of them to icy mountains and they ended up dying, only to get revived as vengeful spirits. That's honestly kind of depressing and fucked up. Who the hell could hate on such a precious creature like Zorua? It's so cute. Stats-wise, it's actually faster and stronger than its regular counterpart, with 5 less stats in attack and health for better speed and special attack. A pretty solid trade-off if you ask me. It also has the ability Illusions like its normal counterpart, but we'll have to see how it performs when it comes back in Scarlet and Violet, since abilities don't exist in Legends. Maybe then I'll get to use it. It shows up just a little too late into the game in Arceus, and I couldn't find out where they spawn in that game, which is a shame because I was super excited for it. Maybe I'll finally have a shiny Zorua by then, you little bitch. Speaking of which, Zorua's new shiny isn't as good as the originals. Unfair to compare because that one is just pure perfection. But Zoroark's new shiny is easily the best they've introduced in Arceus and is easily a top 10 favorite for me now. It took a while for us to get a normal ghost type Pokemon, but I'm glad that these were the first to do it, and they did it very well. The honorable mentions go to Snorlax, an OG monster that wrecks anything in its path if you're willing to use him, and his personality is just such a mood. Porygon Z mainly for its battle prowess and intriguing with the lore, and also the fact that the anime just never wants to use him after that stupid Porygon bullshit, and Regigigas, which is definitely the most bizarre pick out of any of my honorable mentions, bar none. I'm aware that he sucks, but that design is just so cool, and the mythos is so intriguing. He's my guilty pleasure pick for sure. Electric types, one of the coolest types amongst fans, one of the rarest types in the game, and the type holding that obnoxious quick attack pancaking glory hogging piece of shit! I mean, the most beloved Pokemon and mascot of all time that is top tier cute above everyone else. Bullshit! There aren't many electric types out there, but the ones that are out there, they're gonna do wonders for your team if you decide to use them. They're frail for sure, but they only have one weakness and they're usually pretty fast that can rack up damage and status ailments. I rarely use electric types on my team if I have a grass type, mainly because I have a water counter on my team and can cover others with other types. Probably why I don't have too many favorites, honestly, but there was one that managed to grab my heart the previous generation with the fan favorite rock punk Pokemon, Toxtricity. Speaking of unique top combinations I've always wanted, Electric Poison is another one I'm utterly shocked that they haven't tried doing up until now. It's based off of a lizard and a punk rock star. That's pretty dope. But what's more interesting is the concept between the two forms. The amped and low-key forms are based off of an electric guitar and a bass guitar with the purple strums on his chest reflecting that. Now, I'm no musician, but I feel like this would be any guitarist's favorite Pokemon of all time if they ever heard this. And speaking of which, the way that Toxtricity attacks is by strumming the lumps on his chest and letting out huge screams as if it were making music. And it reflects this with its unique ability, Punk Rock, which buffs sound moves like Boom Burst and Overdrive, making them stronger. The stats are interesting for an electric type. Unlike most electric types, Toxtricity focuses on power over speed, being one of the slower fully evolved electric types in the game at that. And the main differences between the two forms, besides the aesthetics, is the move pool. Amped form focuses more on offense and self-buffs, while the low-key form is more for support, just like a bass guitar. Again, this is one of the coolest concepts for a Pokemon in years, and I'm falling in love with it the more I type into the script. Unfortunately though, the Amp form is leagues better than the low-key form. I personally prefer the color palette, and the addition of Shift Gear and Throat Spray can turn him into a goddamn monster if he gets to set up. And while I'm usually not too impressed by G-Max forms, Toxtricity has one of the coolest ones in the game, behind Inteleon, Alcremie, and Orbeetle on my personal list. Perfect Pokemon, honestly, except the shiny. It's just okay. It wasn't even close with this one, but honorable mentions include Manectric for the design and fun use in battle, Zekrom, one of my favorite mascot legendaries, and Electros. Funny enough, this was another type category where I had a difficult time trying to decide before Sword and Shield came out. Seriously, for those of you refusing to play these games for whatever reason, do it for Toxtricity. You won't be sorry. Psychic, the mystical, legendary type, and the OG king of broken bullshit back in the old days. They're strong, the single most common type in the game for legendaries, besides flying that is, and honestly, one of my least favorite types when it comes to the roster. Not to say they're bad, obviously they're not, but they're just so few psychic types that I gravitate towards that I mostly just prefer ghost and flying types for coverage against fighters. The reason I think this is because I find a lot of psychic type designs to be very boring. Oh, this thing is a super fast genius with an unrealistically high IQ of 3000? Okay, then how come I can't speak more than one word in the anime? Riddle me that shit. But thankfully, this next Pokemon is one that I fell in love with at first sight. Oh, come on, not like that, you sick fuck! Yeah, Gardevoir is one of my favorite psychic types. Probably not my definitive favorite, as you'll be seeing a couple others throughout the list. I originally saw Gardevoir for the first time in Super Smash Bros. Brawl as a Pokeball assist. The trophy description said that it has the power to create black holes to protect its trainer, and I thought, wow, that's badass, and it was one thing that helped me become the fan that I am today. The other was because I used to be a Lucario main. Gardevoir was also one of the few Pokemon pre-Gen 6 to receive the fairy typing, and I think it really paid off. I believe that this line has some of the best designs out of any humanoid-shaped Pokemon in the series, looking almost like a beautiful woman wearing a dress that you'd see on a beach in a movie or something like that. A personality and graceful-like movements to reflect that, and you can see that she has a fan base for a reason, even if some people really like her for the wrongest reasons. In battle, she's complemented with good special stats and a solid selection of abilities at her disposal. And just like Game Freak, I don't really care about Megas anymore, but Gardevoir has one of the better ones in my opinion, and there's a reason she's Diantha's ace in the hole. On top of already having a great shiny, her Mega benefits this more than any other in the game. The top stays white, but the dress turns black. That is such an awesome change, and I wish Game Freak would keep Megas around just for that shiny alone. Honorable mentions for this list include Deoxys, my favorite mythical with a really cool concept design, Mewtwo for his iconic status and some recently growing enjoyment out of his playstyle in Smash Bros, and Necrozma, the last legendary Pokemon I feel like I legit gave a shit about. With his sick roll, he has an Ultra Sun and Moon, and for the amazing battle theme in said games. Fighting types are good at hitting really fucking hard, as Among Us is at generating terrible memes, as they hit hard, can take a few hits, and are the one good counter to the dreaded normal types. Except for Hisui and Zoroark, that bitch will fuck you up. Regardless of what gen you're playing in, you're more than likely to find yourself a fighting type on your team due to how much coverage they have. And for me, the best fighting types in the game are the ones who can cover multiple types with their dual typings. And the best one of all, in my opinion anyway, will come as no surprise, Gallade. Yeah, I doubt that this would have come as much surprise after the last entry. I love this Pokemon family so much, and Gallade is honestly tied as not only my favorite fighting type, but possibly my favorite psychic type alongside Gardevoir. I mean, it's a slow pain in the ass trying to get a male Ralts, or God help you if you try to get a shiny male in any game, except Legends Arceus, but let me tell you, it's 100% worth it. Instead of a graceful beach lady, or whatever the hell I said in the last entry, Gallade is more of a combination of a graceful sword fighter and gladiator. Also, epic elbow blades because that's fucking awesome. Stats-wise, the only difference between Gallade and Gardevoir are the attack and special attacks being swapped. It's also the first psychic fighting type in the game with some great type coverage in the move pool, so he can take care of several types at once depending on what your team needs. His Mega evolution is also either my favorite Mega in the game, or at least in my top 4 favorites. That sleek cape and those sharper elbow blades give off the impression of a superhero sometimes. It's a shame that his shiny isn't nearly as good as Mega Gardevoir, and his new ability didn't become useful until after they decided to forget about Megas, but at least that design is pretty sick. Honestly, if Pokemon existed in real life, well, first of all, we'd be fucked if a Slugma ever evolved into a Magcargo, but if they were real and I had to pick either Gardevoir or Gallade for my team, I'd seriously struggle just picking between these two because I love them just about equally. And that again is the sign of a good Pokemon family. Honorable mentions include Hariyama for his bulkiness and just being an interesting idea for a sumo wrestler Pokemon, Phalanx for the animation alone, but also winning points for being incredibly fun to use, and Mean Xiao for the sleek design and an amazing glass cannon approach done surprisingly well. Rock types are the first of our earth-loving friends as the semi-bulky type in the game, with unfortunately the most weaknesses of any type in the game outside of grass. They even like to use ground as a secondary type for some reason. I guess they thought that the water weaknesses wasn't bad enough, I suppose. There's a lot of rocks out there, but honestly, I really struggled to pick a favorite rock type for this video. And honestly, I still can't pick just one. I like this Pokemon just about as much as the honorable mentions I'll name later on, so out of all the types, feel free to take this one with the most amount of salt possible. No pun intended. My opinion may change the week after this video goes up, but my favorite rock type, for now anyway, would have to go to Tyranitar. So I'll admit that Gen 2 is my least favorite gen when it comes to its roster of Pokemon. I had a decent time playing Pokemon Crystal, if only for the shiny Celebi, but I mostly used a team of Gen 1 Pokemon because I'm not too big into the roster of Gen 2. Plus the good ones don't come in until the post-game. Tyranitar, on the other hand, is one of the few non-legendary Pokemon of Gen 2 that I actually like. First of all, the design is kinda cool and it holds up pretty well. It's not super complex, but it's very effective. It's a T-Rex creature with a design marked similar to Godzilla, but it feels low-key kinda cute. The Pokedex, on the other hand, says, "This motherfucker will kill you!" as Tyranitar is strong enough to level a mountain whenever it goes on a rampage. I also like how Pokemon Sword and Shield help fuel the Godzilla design theory by saying that it fights with Duraludon for territory, since Duraludon is supposed to be based on Mechagodzilla in that respect. Really, I couldn't tell. Stats-wise, it's a pseudo-legendary, so of course it's very good, with only 2 stats hitting below 100 and a severely lacking speed stat at 61. It's also the only rock dark Pokemon to exist in the series, at least at the time I made this video, so fighting types be damned. But despite that, he's been a top tier threat in the meta every single generation, even being the best OU Pokemon in Generation 3. Given his stats, move pool, and access to Sandstream, this is one weather Pokemon that you'd be happy to have on your team. Honorable mentions this time around, or my actual favorite rock type depending on my mood that week, include Minior for the cute design, concept, and an interesting gimmick, alongside a top tier shiny, Aerodactyl for being an OG fossil Pokemon that's just really fun to use, and Aggron for basically similar reasons as Tyranitar, with the only caveat being that I've never actually used one in battle, though that may change one day, so who knows. So like rock types, ground is the other earthen type in this series, albeit a bit more consistent and useful offensively, as it's the type to counter electric types. Though I'm not gonna waste your time again saying the same shit as before, and just reveal how basic of a bitch I am by saying that Garchomp is my favorite ground type. I mean, can you really blame me? If he answered yes, then I'd say, touche. The design is one of the coolest and most imposing in the series to date. Imagine if sharks had legs and claws and you get yourself Garchomp. Battle-wise, well, I mean, we already know the type of physical and psychological trauma this thing is capable of thanks to Cynthia. It's another pseudo-legendary Pokemon, and using him is RGF. Really good fucking. Stat total is 600, great attack, good speed, stupid strong typing with a quad weakness to ice, but like, are you seriously gonna live long enough to kill this thing in one hit? This thing was so brain dead and broken that it was the second Pokemon in the series to be banned to Ubers. And even there, it was still dummy strong. It's so good that it's the only Pokemon to have a Mega Evolution that is even worse than the base form. That attack may be monstrously high, but those 10 speed points can go a long way. Honestly, there's not much to say about this stupid Unga Bunga bitch that hasn't been said before a million times. I think he's kinda neat. The only bad thing about Garchomp is that his shiny sucks. It's the worst one on the list by far, by the way. Like, you can hardly tell a difference between them, but at least it's better than fucking Cub Fu. Honorable mentions include Nidoking for the slick badass design and typing, Excadrill for basically the same reasons you're thinking, and Flygon strictly for the design being good, but suffers from the stats being just okay. Hashtag Mega for Flygon. Flying types are another super common type with a mixed variety in breeds. I mean, there's birds to consider, but you've got an assortment of bugs and dragons thrown in there, and they range from being really fun and useful to just HM slaves. This one is technically cheating as it's more associated with dragons, but I gotta put something on here, and I honestly don't give a shit about anything else other than Salamence. So, we got ourselves another pseudo-legendary. I know this is making me look like a total power whore, but I promise you, I am 100% a power whore. The first time I ever saw a Salamence was back when I first played Pokemon Coliseum for the GameCube. At the end where you fight Evis and his bullshit team of level 60 bullshitters, he had a Salamence on his team. I thought to myself before it murdered my ass, damn, that's a cool Pokemon, where can I get one of those? I unfortunately didn't get one until Pokemon XD, where it was by far the strongest Pokemon you can get up to that point, and I was a very happy lad. The design is quite simple, but sleek and cool as hell. The color palette is also fantastic. The mix of light blue and crimson Regis fixes Pokemon to a T and makes it stand out. The Pokedex of the family is also super cute. Bagon had dreams of growing wings and flying, and it achieved this by yeeting itself off of small cliffs until it finally achieved its dreams by becoming Salamence and being pissed off all the time. I guess there's life lessons even in Pokemon. Stats-wise, Salamence is similar to Dragonite of Gen 1, but sacrifices some bulk for better mix attack and better speed, though its ability Intimidate helps rectify the lack of defense and allows Salamence to wreck shop almost uncontested. Unless they're holding an Ice Beam, in which case he's fucked. He's also like Garchomp in that he's been a top tier threat in just about every generation due to his broken abilities and great stats. The Mega Evolution is okay. It's cool that he's a hang glider, but I am not a fan of the wings fusing into each other. It just looks kinda off-putting to me. And also, the shiny, while much better than Garchomp's, is still kinda gross looking, and I just don't like it. I don't normally hate gray shinies like a lot of people, but the mixture of orange and lime green just doesn't suit this Pokemon well at all. Though I admit that it holds a very special place in my heart, as it was the first shiny I ever went out of my way to get, so there's that at least. Honorable mentions go to Corviknight for the great design, typing, and for one of the cooler G-Max forms in concept, Braviary for the design, shiny, and some passing usage in Pokemon White, though the Hisuian form is decent in my opinion, and Honchkrow for the design and for having one of the best fainting animations in the series. I mean, just look at this. Makes you wish that Game Freak put this much effort into more stuff like this nowadays. Bug types. The creepy crawlies and probably the most despised type of Pokemon for a lot of people. Just like in real life, whether you like it or not, they're everywhere and they're annoying as shit. The same goes for the bugs at the beginning of each game. They start off as strong beat sticks early on, but become as useless as used condoms after the first couple of gens. At least until Vikavolt and Orbeetle came into play in Gen 7 and 8. Though we all know the best Pokemon are Pokemon that start off good and stay useful throughout the game. And in this case, until the end of time. With that said, here's another obvious pick in Scizor. Again, I'm a total power whore. Now, Scyther was always a Pokemon that stands out in a good way for me for being a badass Bug-type Pokemon. Then Game Freak decided to give it an evolution and make it 10 times cooler. It doesn't have sights for arms anymore, but it's got these giant metal pincers that can seriously fuck some bitches up if it ever gets their claws on them. Funny enough, its speed stat is way worse than Scyther's, and even the new kid on the block, Cleavor, is faster. Although it makes up for better attack, defenses, and a godly defensive typing with only one weakness to fire. And just like the last two Pokemon I talked about, Scizor has been an absolute monster in competitive, though it was pretty niche until it became the best non-Uber in the game in Gen 4 with shit like Bullet Punch and Technician. This Pokemon is just the complete package and it has everything you want, except the terrible shiny, which is just ugh. And as for my opinions on Cleavor, well, I find the design to be kinda ugly, not gonna lie, but I did use it in Legends Arceus, and sure enough, it's an absolute powerhouse of a Pokemon when you send him out. The shiny is much better at the very least. So if you ever need a bug type on your Pokemon, if Volcarona doesn't do it for you, Scizor will definitely fill that niche. Honorable mentions go to Heracross for its fun use, and for being one of the MVPs in my team for the Ore Coliseum in XD, alongside Snorlax. Volcarona for the typing and fun use when the 3 years it takes to evolve finally passes. It would have been my favorite bug type if it weren't for that. And Orbeetle for the concept of its evolutionary line, fantastic shiny, and for having one of the best Gmax forms in the series. Honestly, a perfect beginning bug Pokemon. Poison types have gone through several shifts throughout their lifetime. They started off as one of the absolute worst types in the game, to a status-afflicting juggernaut and not much else, to a total offensive powerhouse with the introduction of fairy types. I've usually liked the designs for the most part, but I usually never liked using them until Generation 6 when they became more offensively viable thanks to previously mentioned fairies. And one that has always been cool and fun to use for me since its inception is Roserade. Roselia is a cute Pokemon with an interesting design, but I never bothered to use it because of its major shortcomings as a Pokemon overall. But then Gen 4 gave it an evolution, and not only does it look super sick, but it ended up fixing some of its major weaknesses. Admittedly, I mainly like this Pokemon for the design. I mean, can't blame me too much, right? As its pose reflects its calm and cool nature, giving off a sense of grace and poise. I really only say that because the lore of this Pokemon is kind of boring, though granted I don't really need lore in order for a Pokemon to be sick, right? Stats wise, it's got a decent speed stat, but only complemented by having a really strong special attack. My only problem is that I wish the move pool had better coverage without having to breed, but what can you do? I still had fun using it in my playthrough of Brilliant Diamond, and I'd gladly use it again any day. Honorable mentions go to Dragology for being the first poison dragon and doing it in a very interesting way. Translation, I think it looks cool. It probably would have been my favorite poison type for this segment, except I had never used one before. But I'm very interested in the idea, so who knows. Naganadel for being my favorite Ultra Beast, and Gengar, the OG ghost type for its unique typing, and it's pretty fun to use at that. Dark types are the edgelords of the Pokemon franchise when it comes to designs. Chances are that if you're a Hot Topic shopping piece of shit like me, then your favorite Pokemon is obviously Darkrai. Or any Dark type, honestly. No, my favorite Pokemon isn't Dark type. You'll have to wait until later for that revelation, boys and girls. My favorite Pokemon of all time isn't Dark type, but my favorite Gen 8 Pokemon sure as hell is. So before Sword and Shield were released into the world, and before the news of the National Dex being cut was a thing, they showed off a Pokemon in the demo called Impidimp. The name was hilariously stupid and the design was really ugly, but that dark fairy typing caught my attention from the start. I was hoping that it would get a cool evolution or something, and sure enough, it delivered on a higher scale than I could have expected. First of all, that design is just awesome. It's a big old goblin covered in hair, you know, like Bayonetta. It uses the hair to make itself bulkier and stronger, and supposedly is strong enough to rival Machamp. I mean, granted, its attack stat is actually worse than Machamp's, but whatever, right? The Pokedex is just full of bullshit. Gameplay-wise, Grimmsnarl is interesting, to say the least. It's got an attack stat worse than Machamp's, sitting at 120, which isn't bad at all, mind you. Mixed in with its Dark Fairy typing, it can do some work in PvE, but in PvP, the preferred playstyle is as a support Pokemon? Yeah, this thing gets prankster and people use it to set up dual screens and spread status ailments. I mean, that's a bit weird for a big-ass hairy ogre monster, but hey, Gen 8 has Pokemon that are used in weirder ways than that. The Gmax form doesn't change the design too much, but the animations in the Pokedex show it using dive kicks where its legs turn into fucking drills. That's something you'd see in a kaiju anime or Gurren Lagann, and that's pretty dope. Like Roserade, the lore is the worst part about him. but I don't care. I think it looks cool and I'll gladly take him over Klefki any day. Also, since I haven't brought it up in a while, the shiny is simple but looks pretty dope. Honorable mentions include Darkrai for being my second favorite mythical Pokemon in the game with good stats and a cool design and lore, regular Zoroark for the exact same reasons as the Hisui form I explained earlier, and Hydreigon, the OG Pokemon that took 60 plus levels to evolve. It was a ridiculously painful journey, but going through the trouble of getting this beast of a Pokemon was totally worth it. Ghost types. If you had to ask me what my favorite type was, I'd say that it's without doubt the ghost type. They've got some solid utility for sure, but this is, in my opinion, the most consistent type in terms of quality with the designs and lore. From vengeful spirits to possessed objects, chances are that when a ghost type is revealed in a new generation, then I'm gonna love it. As if 3 out of 13 of the candidates so far being part ghost says anything, then I don't know what to say to you. And I really hope we finally get that rock ghost unlike Runerigus, who should have been rock ghost instead of rock ground, you poser. There's so much overlap with other types on my list that it'd probably be faster to name my least favorite ghost types, Jellicent, Hisuian, Typhlosion, and even then, they're just okay. But because of some other candidates later on preventing me from doing so, I had to hold off on talking about my favorite ghost type. For now. So instead, I'm just going to talk about Aegislash. Yeah, those who are familiar with my old one will have seen this coming, and my opinion hasn't shifted in the slightest on this one. It's a ghost sword Pokemon. That's awesome. And I'm baffled it took them this long to implement something like that, though we're 9 generations in and we still don't have a Pokemon based on a dolphin or a peacock yet, so at least they're consistent at being inconsistent. Aegislash's lore is interesting as it is always the partner of medieval kings and decides who will be next in line for the crown. Sword and Shield added to this by saying that it once absorbed the soul of its partner and caused the kingdom he ruled over to fall to ruin. Again, proof that ghost types have awesome lore. Battle-wise, Aegislash is a ghost steel type with 2 forms of switches on depending on the move it uses. Attack, and it's a top tier defenses swap to top tier attack stats. But use King Shield, then it goes back to unbreakable defenses. The way his evolutions were built give the impression that it excels at physical attacks, but truth is that you can build this Pokemon into whatever you want. Physical attacks, special attacks, go for it. Whatever your team needs, he can fill that slot easily. And it's because of this versatility that he was so hated in the competitive scene that he is so far the only Pokemon in this series to receive a stat nerf between generations. Now, I don't play Pokemon competitively, so I just thought that shit was really funny. And he was one of 2 Pokemon to be added as DLC in Pokemon Tournament for Switch, even though we should have gotten way more than these 2 Pokemon. But alas, he was pretty fun. Also, how the hell does this entire evolutionary family have top tier shinies? Honorable mentions go to Dusknoir for the sick design and lore of it being the Pokemon equivalent to the Grim Reaper. The only downside is I wish he wasn't absolute trash. Delmise for the bizarre concept and the simple nostalgia of it being my very first Masuda method shiny. And Dragapult, a solid, worthy new Pokemon to carry the Dragon Ghost typing with great stats and an awesome design. Also, the chill Dreepies on its head are pretty cute, honestly. So, if you know me, then you know that when it comes to the elements, ice is by far my favorite. In fiction, anyway. I can dream of having badass ice powers akin to Glacius and Sub-Zero, but try to get me to drive on an icy road in real life? Fuck out of here. But when it comes to Pokemon, on the other hand, ice types are amongst my least favorite types in the game for a couple of reasons. 1, they're redundant because water types can learn ice types. 2, their defenses are garbage and are not fun to play around. And 3, I don't like most of their designs. It's basically the same as last time, and Gen 8's ugly ass spike bitch isn't looking to change my mind. But at the same time, we did get something in Generation 8 I never thought I'd like as much as I did, Mr. Rime. So when the Sword and Shield leaks were surfacing, I saw Mr. Rime and I honestly had no idea what to make of him. It's got a mustache and a big-ass face on his stomach, like, what the actual fuck? Like, you spend some time with him and watch some lore videos, and that's when it all comes together. Mr. Rime is the comedian Pokemon, with heavily designed influence from the likes of old-school comedians like Charlie Chaplin and tap dancers, which is just so cool to me. I was even caught off guard by his animations, and I gushed about how charming he was in my Let's Play of Sword way back when.
Oh, he's dancing. He's dancing.
Oh god. Then his shiny color also reflects the old school comedian vibe by having a more monochrome color. It probably would have looked way better if it was pure black and white, but the attempt gives it a lot more personality, and I love it for that. Though I admit that my love for this Pokemon mostly comes from its top tier design and personality, and nothing to do with its battle prowess. Battle-wise, it's a Psychic Ice type, with the only other Pokemon to share that type being Jinx, which I'm actually glad that it has this typing because I fucking hate Jinx. But that's about all that it has going for it. It's got okay special stats and one interesting ability in Screen Cleaner, but it's slower than Galarian Mr. Mime, and since it's an ice type, it just gets fucked up by just about anything you throw at him. Which is a shame, but alas, I love this dude for the good stuff he's got going for him, and I'm so happy that I used him in my Let's Play. Honorable mentions include Q-Rem, the original winner of this type in my last video for the lore and battle prowess, being a Mega Evolution before Mega Evolutions were a thing. By the way, Game Freak, please don't include another Dragon Ice type. I quite like this one being the only one around. God damn it! Cantonian Articuno for that amazing design, even though competitively he sucks ass, and Weavile for being a fun glass cannon with a cool design and semi-cute demeanor in Pokken Tournament. Steel types, the juggernauts of the Pokemon series, one of the best counters to fairy types, and oh my god, one of the most annoying types in the game to go up against. Seriously, fuck you, Klefki. But just like with Salamence, if I had to pick my favorite pseudo-legendary of the series, yeah, I'd still pick Salamence, but this one's a pretty close second, Metagross. One's a Dragon Boy, this one on the other hand is a weird steel robo-monster with the intelligence of a supercomputer. And like with Salamence, I've always been captivated by the design as soon as I saw it. I mean, I first saw this thing in Brawl, but I also saw it in Colosseum as Nazgûr's Shadow Pokemon and couldn't have been happier to have it on my team. Since it's a pseudo-legendary, man, you think I really like pseudo-legendaries, you'd expect it to have pretty beefy stats, and yes, you'd be right. It's slow as molasses, compared to the other pseudo-legendaries anyway, but it has some truly spectacular physical stats to make up for it. And it's the Mon that has introduced us to one of the coolest attacks in the game, Meteor Mash. Seriously, the name alone just sounds badass. It hits hard as fuck and has a chance to raise the attack stat, making it even scarier to go up against. Though I kinda wish it stayed exclusive to Metagross, but whatever. Not much else to say about it that other people haven't already. It's badass, it hits hard as fuck, takes hits like a champ, the shiny is sick, and it's seriously fun to use. No wonder it's Steven's ace in the hole on his team. Now, I said before that Gardevoir and Gallade may be my favorite psychic types, but if I'm being real, this is my favorite psychic type. But you know, dim rules. It's a bitch pick for sure, but I don't really give a shit. I love this thing so much. Honorable mentions go to Bronzong for the concept and nostalgia, as he was my MVP in my battle against Scythia back in Pokemon Platinum, Magnezone for being fun to use and having a really cool evolution to one of Gen 1's lazier designs, and Bisharp for being the first Steel archetype in the series and for making a chess piece Pokemon look surprisingly badass. Okay, so for this part, we're actually going to skip the dragon types, saving them for last for reasons that will become very obvious as we go along, and move on to the fairy types, the most recent type instead. So, from the top. So Fairy type was kind of a surprise for a lot of players when it was first revealed back in Gen 6. Not only was it a new type after 2 decades of nothing since Dark and Steel, not only was it the best type in the game for countering Dragon types, but it was a new type that helped make so many older Pokemon way better as a result. They're almost the equivalent of Gen 1 Psychic types if you really think about it, as if the existence of Mega Mawile and Zacian don't help counter that point. And unlike a lot of other Psychic types, I actually like way more fairy types than I do psychic. Though my favorite fairy type is Gardevoir, the second closest favorite for me is the Gen 8 equivalent in Hatterene. So Hatterene was yet another Pokemon that caught my eye, not just because of the Gardevoir similarities, hey, you took it there, not me, but this is easily the closest I've had to having a new favorite psychic type since Gen 3. I really like the color palette and the unique lore within the Pokemon family. Hatena's nothing special, though I wish its hat thing wasn't its ass pointing straight up, but Hatrem is also a top 5 cutest Pokemon ever, and the theme are really cool, if somewhat disturbing at the same time if you think about it. They hate people with strong emotions, so sorry to all the shonen anime protagonists at 101 I guess, but they also hate loud noises, as Hattrem will basically smack you like a football player's wife, while Hatterene is a forest witch that basically murders you if you piss it off. Well fuck, better not show her my last video then. And I like how the G-Max form carries over the fairy tale inspirations, being reminiscent to Rapunzel's tower. That's cool. Stats-wise, Hatterene is essentially a slower but much stronger Gardevoir with access to Magic Bounce. The slow speed and middly bulk means that it falls over very easily, but set up Trick Room and she's a total powerhouse. Overall, while she didn't end up being my favorite Gen 8 Pokemon like I thought she would, I still really enjoy her and the concept is super cool. It's just that I couldn't play any Bunny the Bear if there was one nearby. Honorable mentions go to Alchemy, my favorite food-based Pokemon, and the one in close contention for this spot. Honestly, I think this Pokemon is just adorable. It's more so for the cosmetics than battle prowess because Alchemy's stats are basically just Gardevoir's but worse, and with a terrible move pool. But I just like the design and the concept behind the multiple flavors, and aw, it's just so adorable! But enough of that, continuing the mentions with Florges for being the closest thing to a new Gardevoir Gen 6, and Tapu Fini, my favorite of the Tapus for that amazing design. even though I'm still salty not getting a shiny. And last but not least, dragons. One of the strongest types and one of my absolute favorites. They started off shit because Dragonite was shit, but then they became the powerhouse of the Pokemon world. They're usually very powerful, rare, and extremely popular amongst trainers in-game and in real life. If I ever play through a Pokemon game, no matter how hard it is to get one, I have to have a Dragon type on my team. So the obvious reason why I saved Dragon for last, and foreshadowed earlier in the video in a very unsubtle way, my favorite Pokemon of all time is Dragon type. Some of you that have seen my last video already know who it is, but I'll be listing the honorable mentions first before we reveal him. So from the top, Haxorus for the design, shiny, and insane battle prowess, Kommo-o for being the first dragon fighting type and putting a unique spin on it, and finally Rayquaza for reasons that should be obvious to everyone at this point. But even then, none of the candidates, none of the honorable mentions, not even Mega Rayquaza or Zacian Crown's broken asses can take away the throne of my favorite Pokemon of all time, Giratina. I mean, of course I would. I said before, I'm a Hot Topic shopping piece of shit, and that's never gonna change. I main Sephiroth in Smash, Raven in Guilty Gear, will main him in Drive if he ever comes back, and my favorite Pokemon of all time for over a decade has been the Pokemon equivalent to Satan. I really wish I was joking, but that's basically what he is. Giratina is the third member of the space-time trio of Sinnoh, representing antimatter, but he tried to dethrone Arceus with Volo in Legends Arceus, and got sent to timeout in his own personal distorted world, where the laws of time and space make no sense, and waterfalls go in whichever direction they damn well feel like. Remember when Game Freak gave a shit about the lore of its legendaries? I do. Baskin-Robbins remembers too. Giratina also has the coolest design in the series, and I will 100% die on that hill. You are not changing my mind. From this weird six-legged creature to this giant serpent demon thing, it just reeks of that edge, and I can't help but adore it. Stats-wise, Dialga and Palkia are kind of similar to each other, having a really strong special attack, with the small differences being in their defenses or speed stats being higher. Giratina, on the other hand, functions more as a tanky boy. He has decent offensive stats, but has better bulk and one of the highest HP stats in the entire game, dealing passive damage and stalling with his altered form, but his origin form trades in pressure and bulk for levitate and some much better attack stats. So realistically, Giratina can function as a jack of all trades and fit whatever role your team needs, though it sucks that he's only B rank in Ubers nowadays, but oh well, who cares about that, he's badass. Honestly, what more is there to say that I haven't said already before? I love the design, I love the lore, I love the shiny, he's fun to use, his battle music is amazing in every single way, and he's also the best thing to happen in his garbage ass movie. He's just the fucking best, you guys. Giratina was and still is my favorite Pokemon of all time. And Game Freak, I have one message for you. I dare you to try to make a Pokemon that will take his throne away. Challenge level impossible. I'm the Awesome Yojimbo, and thank you guys so much for watching. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go hate myself and shiny hunt for those new Pokemon. Why do I do this to myself? Hey, Editing Yojimbo again. Since Scarlet and Violet came out between the last video and this one, because I'm a lazy asshole, I'm going to be discussing my favorite Pokemon from Gen 9 the same way. Though, it'll be more rapid fire this time since A, the video's long enough as is, and B, I have no intentions of doing another Pokemon video anytime soon. The only difference with this video is I'm not counting Koraidon or Miraidon, because, I mean, come on, they're going to sweep every category if I did include them. I gotta make it fair somehow. So, starting off with Grass. So I picked Sprigatito in my playthrough of Pokemon Scarlet since I'm a Grass starter loyalist. Its evolution was pretty neat with this sick ass yo-yo, then it evolved into Meowscarada, and yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I was not impressed with the design at all. I mean, to be fair, it did grow on me a bit, and the concept is interesting at least. But it gets this spot because he's a fucking unit. He's frail AF, but he makes up for being very powerful and very fast. Basically what Decidueye should have been. I'll admit, he definitely grew on me, but he's not my favorite starter of this generation. Now this is my favorite starter of the generation. Fuecoco's pretty cute, and he was my pick in Violet, and I'm glad that I used him. Crocolore's design was a bit on the nose if you ask me, but that sombrero does have a purpose. Then it evolves into an opera singer? Yeah, that's the last thing I would have ever expected this Pokemon to turn into. And I'm not gonna lie, this thing was an absolute bruiser in my playthrough. But the thing with the lore, not just because of the fact that it's a ghost type, that stupid sombrero is actually a nest for a little baby bird, and that thing you see on the nose of Skeledirge is the bird, and it uses that as a fucking boom mic. That's pretty sick. Honestly, this might be my new favorite fire starter of all time. Though, I'm not gonna lie, it's tough competition, so it's probably up there with Blaziken. It's a tie at least. And now for the water type Pokemon, it's your boy, Palafin. So admittedly, one of the Pokemon I wanted the most was a Narwhal Pokemon, but a Dolphin was a pretty close one, and I'm very happy with what they did with this Pokemon. The design is just so cute. Now, I've heard a lot of people complain about Palafin's design, saying that it's basically just the same thing, but with a heart. But honestly, if you think about it, this design is kind of brilliant. Like, it's a superhero. Of course it's gonna look exactly the same. It's gotta blend in with the crowd, you know? And honestly, the superhero form is so funny. This design is just the goofiest shit I've ever seen, and the fact that it's literally just Regigigas without the worst ability imaginable, and the fact that it got banned after a week is hilarious. I think Greninja is still my favorite water type of all time, but this is a close second. I love this Pokemon. Yeah, I don't know. Cyclizar? That's probably the closest thing. I don't know what to tell you. The normal types of this generation weren't that good. So for the electric types, I'm gonna go with Iron Hands. The design is one of the more boring ones of the Paradox Pokemon, but yeah, he's a fucking unit in raid battles. I mean, it's a pretty boring answer, but I never used Iron Thorns before, and this is the only correct choice when Miraidon's not allowed. The psychic types of this generation are kinda boring. The closest thing to a psychic type I like this generation, on the other hand, is Rapska. This design is pitch perfect. I love this design so much. I'd never used it, but I think it's a cool concept, and the shiny is fantastic. Annihilate is awesome. They took my least favorite fighting type Pokemon from the first 3 generations and turned him into an absolute badass. Like, Primeape just got so fucking angry that he turned into a Kuma from Street Fighter is awesome. Plus, it's yet another Pokemon that got banned pretty quickly, so that's also funny. And he also gets points because he's a ghost type. I like ghost types. The first time I saw this Pokemon's design, I thought I was gonna fucking hate it. I absolutely despise Minecraft's art style. That, in my opinion, will never change on that. Don't even bother. But I used him, and I'm not gonna lie, this Pokemon's really good. Like, it starts off as a mushroom power-up from Mario, and then it turns into a Minecraft abomination to a Minecraft golem. Like, it's not my absolute favorite design, but I do like it quite a bit. Knuckle Stack still sucks, though. Ground types are also kind of sparse, there's not a whole lot to go off, but honestly, Great Tusk or Iron Treads. Pick your poison, I don't really care. I'm gonna pick Squawkabilly because, again, not the biggest fan of the flying types of this generation. My favorite is the blue one because it reminds me of my pet bird, Buki. The Slitherwing is really cute. I understand the appeal behind it, although I don't get why it has a tiny dragon tail on it. Like, what the hell? And also, like, why is this bug fighting? It looks like it should be Bug Dragon instead. Seriously, Game Freak, why? Iron Moth is basically Mecha Volcarona, but I like this one a lot more than Slitherwing, personally. Plus, it's fire poison, and he's an absolute unit. Now, I gotta say, if your favorite type is Dark type, you really gotta love this generation of Pokemon, because not only are there dozens of Dark types, but all the Dark types in this generation are really good. But for this one, I'm gonna go with King Gambit. I originally said that Bisharp was an honorable mention for my favorite Steel and Dark type, and King Gambit is definitely no exception. This design is really sick. And also the fact that he runs around by sliding on his slick-ass hair is pretty funny. Now, if I could be completely honest, I love the Ghost type, but this generation's Ghost types are pretty disappointing. I mean, they're okay. They're a lot better than Gen 2's roster, for sure, but I'm not crazy in love with any of them, if that makes sense. Although, Ceruledge is still really cool. I used him in my playthrough of Pokemon Scarlet. Yes, you heard me correctly. And he was an absolute bruiser. Although, seriously, Game Freak, fix the shiny. Like, what the fuck? Now, I already said what my favorite ice type is in the video, but Baxcalibur is probably the biggest contender for my favorite ice type of all time. It's Godzilla. Like, that's really cool. And my roommate is a huge Godzilla fan, so I've learned to really appreciate this character. And the fact that his signature move is literally pulled from classic Godzilla is really awesome. Plus, he's really fun to use. I joked about not wanting another Dragon Ice type, but I welcome this one. Tinkaton is probably the most popular Pokemon of the generation, and I can definitely see why. The design is absolutely adorable, and the concept is so cool. This is easily my favorite Pokemon of Generation 9. Is what I would be saying if it wasn't for these horrible stats. Like, what the hell? Like, look at these stats, they're bad! Why is its attack stat base 75? Were you just scared that it was going to turn into another Zacian Crown? It has a signature move that's the Gen 1 equivalent to Hyper Beam, but seriously, come on, this thing's attack stat should have been 100, not fucking 70. But as is, the design, it is carried by the design, I'll give it that. Yeah, Salamence is my third favorite Pokemon of all time, spoilers by the way, but then they gave him a unique Paradox form, and this is my second favorite Paradox form in the game, and my favorite of Pokemon Scarlet. The design is so sick, it's way better than the Mega form. Plus, all the shiny Pokemon I wasted my time getting instead of like finishing the damn video on time, this one is my badge of honor. This shit was so satisfying. Even though I've run into 23 shiny Violets trying to get him. And finally, fairy types. Gardevoir and Gallade are some of my favorite Pokemon of all time, and then they made a fusion form of them. Iron Valiant is awesome. Easily my favorite Paradox Pokemon, and also has the best shiny, Fight Me. Now, am I going to prefer this over Gardevoir or Gallade? Honestly, time's going to have to tell, but as of right now, this is probably my favorite Pokemon of Generation 9. Either that or Palafin, because the super form is really funny. Anyways, that's the end of the video for sure. Thank you guys so much for watching, and sorry again, it took me forever to make this. Bye!